King Charles made history today by delivering a historic address to the French Parliament, becoming the first British monarch to do so. In his speech, he emphatically labeled global warming as the most existential challenge of our time. This significant proclamation came mere hours after Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, made a surprising U-turn on the UK's green targets. The monarch underscored the deep-rooted friendship between the United Kingdom and France, but directed his focus towards the urgent need to address climate change. He called for a new Entente Cordiale, specifically aimed at confronting the global climate and biodiversity emergency. Speaking fluently in French, King Charles suggested that France and Britain should exhibit the same unity seen during the World Wars, and more recently in Ukraine, emphasizing the importance of standing together to combat environmental challenges. This call came shortly after the Prime Minister cautioned against imposing unacceptable costs and heavy-handed measures on families, as it could undermine support for environmental conservation. King Charles, who has dedicated decades to advocating for environmental causes, stated, "The challenge facing our planet is both immense and grave." Recent events have once again demonstrated the vulnerability of much that we hold dear. Just as we stand together against military aggression, so must we come together to protect the world from our most pressing challenge: global warming, climate change, and the catastrophic loss of biodiversity. He continued, "Let us therefore cherish and nurture our Entente Cordiale. Let us renew it for future generations, and I propose that it also becomes an Entente pour la Durabilité, sustainability agreement, aimed at addressing the global climate and biodiversity emergency more effectively. Let us move forward with hope and courage, and let us do it together." While King Charles addressed the Parliament, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak was expressing his commitment to achieving the 2050 net zero target, but without burdening British citizens with bills of up to £15,000 to meet green objectives. He also announced a 5-year delay in banning the sale of petrol and diesel cars, aligning Britain with France and the rest of the EU, moving the deadline from 2030 to 2035. King Charles, who is currently on the second day of his state visit to France, experienced overwhelming support from the French people, with cries of "Vive le roi" echoing through the streets of Paris. The French Senate welcomed him with a standing ovation lasting nearly 2 minutes. In his address in Paris, the king expressed his affection for France and his commitment to strengthening the indispensable relationship between France and the UK, especially in the context of addressing climate change. He also touched upon his mother's deep affinity for France and President Macron's tribute to her as the golden thread connecting the two nations. Reflecting on his mother's passing nearly a year ago, he expressed gratitude for the kindness and support extended by the French people during a time of profound grief. The historic day, marked by the king's speeches in both English and French, and the standing ovations he received, followed a lavish banquet at the Palace of Versailles. King Charles' address from the French Senate chamber added another significant chapter to his state visit to Paris and Bordeaux, making him the first British monarch to speak there. In closing, he invited both nations to embrace their boundless potential in forging a brighter future together. Let us therefore cherish and nurture our Entente Cordiale. Let us renew it for future generations, so that, I would like to propose, it also becomes an Entente pour la Durabilité, agreement for sustainability, in order to tackle the global climate and biodiversity emergency more effectively. A commitment to each other and to the values we so proudly share. A commitment inspired by the example of the past and emboldened to grapple with the immense challenges in the world around us. As neighbors, friends, partners, and allies, there is no challenge to which we cannot rise, as we have done so often in the past. Let us stride forward with hope and courage, and let us do so together. The king opened his speech in French, thanking members for his welcome, and said, "I need hardly say how greatly honored I am to have been invited by the presidents of both houses to speak here, in this hallowed chamber, which has been the upper house of French politics in one form or another since 1799. He was greeted with a round of applause as he quipped, "May the best win between the French and English, Welsh and Scottish national teams, competing in the Rugby World Cup being hosted in France." He said in English, "Millions of us visit each other's countries every year. a joy that we are now rediscovering after the disruption wrought by the pandemic. Tens of thousands of British rugby fans are currently following their national team around France, enjoying the fantastic spectacle of the Rugby World Cup, my son and daughter-in-law among them. Even when our national teams are drawn up on opposite ends of the pitch, they do so with mutual admiration and a shared commitment to the rules of the game, on which I will say only pas de coups et que le malheur gagne. And of course, hundreds of thousands of our fellow citizens have chosen to live their lives permanently in each other's countries. This vibrant exchange between our people makes us immeasurably stronger, happier, and more prosperous. Last night, Charles sipped on champagne with President Emmanuel Macron and cheered the French leader on as he spoke about the two countries' firm friendship in Versailles' extraordinary Hall of Mirrors. The king was joined by his wife, Queen Camilla, French and British dignitaries, as well as a number of high-profile celebrities, including Rolling Stones frontman Sir Mick Jagger and actor Hugh Grant. Well-known faces of English football, including former Arsenal manager Arsene Wenger, ex-Chelsea striker Didier Drogba, and Patrick Vieira, who played for Arsenal and managed Crystal Palace, were also in attendance. Other dinner guests in the glittering Hall of Mirrors included Charlotte Gainsbourg, the actor and daughter of French singer Serge Gainsbourg, and British actor Jane Birkin. Guests dined on Blue Lobster, poached breast chicken with mushroom gratin, and a selection of French and English cheeses, including Comte from France and Stichelton from Britain, all washed down with vintage wine and champagne. The dessert was a macaron with lychee and rose sorbet and raspberry compote, but foie gras was off the menu, with the king having banned it from his royal household. In a speech, switching between French and English, the king highlighted the long and complex history between Britain and France that has not been entirely straightforward, with a joke that promoted laughter at the table. I think it was a French king who once said that he would rather be a woodcutter than the King of England, dealing with our national complexities. As an avid forester, I am pleased to report that it is entirely possible to combine the two, Charles joked. He said the postponed visit had been worth the wait, and he and his wife were both enormously touched by the magnificent welcome that has been extended to us, as had the moving tribute paid by the country on the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth. Mr. President, among the many profoundly moving gestures here, the flying of the Union flag at the Elysee was particularly poignant, he said. Your words, at that time, meant a great deal to us too. You said that she had touched your hearts, and it was she who held France in the greatest affection, as of course did my grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. He reminisced that his parents' first official visit together was to France in 1948, shortly after their wedding. According to reports, they made a significant impression by dancing into the early hours at the glamorous Chaise Carrère on Rue Pierre Charon, accompanied by the enchanting tunes of Edith Piaf, he mentioned. I have a suspicion that this event might have left a lasting mark on me, even though it happened 6 months before I was born. To this day, La Vie en Rose remains one of my favorite songs. He characterized this visit as a symbol of the enduring relationship between our two countries. Our people share numerous connections which represent the lifeblood of our Entente Cordiale, a pact inspired by my great-great-grandfather, King Edward VI, he remarked. He also expressed his satisfaction at seeing Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's visit to Paris earlier in the year for the first Franco-British summit in 5 years. During this summit, they discussed cooperation on various matters, including Ukraine, the issue of human trafficking, access to energy, and a sustainable future. As they raised their glasses to the Entente Cordiale, he concluded, whatever the future holds, may it remain faithful and constant, enduring for centuries to come. Earlier, Charles presented Mr. Macron with a book filled with photographs of their encounters and a complete edition of the writings of the French philosopher Voltaire during his visit to the Élysée Palace, the official residence of the president. In return, Mr. Macron gifted the king a golden coin featuring Charles's portrait, along with an award-winning French novel. The couple arrived at the Élysée Palace in the same car, closely followed by the Queen and President Macron's wife, Brigitte Macron. Subsequently, they jointly planted an oak tree, another gift from Mr. Macron. During an earlier event, Camilla wore a dusky pink Wool Creek coat dress by Fiona Clare and a pink Barrett-style hat created by milliner Philip Treacy. The couple touched down at Paris-Orly Airport, where they received an honor guard from the Republican Guard, a division of the French National Gendarmerie. They then participated in a ceremony of remembrance and laid wreaths at the Arc de Triomphe in the heart of the city. Charles symbolically lit the eternal flame at the monument, which honors those who perished in the First and Second World Wars. This marked the first inclusion of the ceremony in a state visit in 30 years. The national anthems of France and Britain were played, and there was a flypast by the Patrouille de France and the Red Arrows before the couples traveled along the Champs-Élysées by car. Most of the original royal itinerary remained intact, with a few additions, such as the Queen and Mrs. Macron inaugurating a new Franco-British literary prize at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. On Thursday, Charles will become the first British monarch to deliver a speech from France's Senate chamber. Other highlights of their visit include the royal couple meeting with sports stars during the Rugby World Cup hosted by France. During their visit to Bordeaux, home to 39,000 Britons, they will engage with UK and French military personnel to learn about the two nations' defense collaboration. Originally planned for March, this tour was intended to be their first state visit, but was postponed at the last minute due to nationwide protests against Mr. Macron's retirement age reforms. Just a few days before the scheduled trip, protesters set fire to Bordeaux's town hall. Dear friend, if you like everything new about the royal family and don't want to miss all the novelties, subscribe to our channel and like it. By doing so, you take part in our development. We work for you.